We were married for 6 years. My husband thought I was too simple. He said I was like a salted fish. He later became obsessed with a sexy female online broadcaster. She threw a book on self-improvement for young women at me. It was about how to please a man. I sneered. I threw the book back at her. I said, "If you know so much, keep it for yourself." That was the end of our 6-year relationship. When I got home, I set fire to our marital home. At that moment, I no longer loved him. I told Christopher, "We will never meet again." My husband knelt in the ruins of our wedding room, crying so loudly that the whole neighborhood could hear him. I stood outside the door, listening to their conversation. I felt so sad. We had been married for 6 years. My husband said he didn't like that I was too simple. He found me boring and dull. I tried my best to please him. I turned myself into a doll that could be changed at will. The result, he is still not satisfied. He is still infatuated with the entertainment anchor. At this time, the phone suddenly rang. It was a message from Christopher. "Why haven't you arrived yet? How long are you going to make me wait?" I adjusted my mood, knocked on the door, and walked in. "Why are you so inconsiderate? Everyone is waiting for you alone." He leaned lazily on the sofa, frowning, appearing very unhappy with my lateness. I made up an excuse to get away from him. I had to work overtime today. I really couldn't help it. Then I tried to sit down next to him, but he pushed me away. He said coldly, "Don't sit here. This isn't your seat." As soon as Christopher had finished speaking, everyone laughed. "My sister-in-law, we have important guests coming today. Please bear with us." Christopher's brother Ryan spoke first. He spoke in a joking tone. I stood there, a little embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I could only look at Christopher. Christopher frowned impatiently. He said, "Find a seat yourself." Do I need to remind you of such a simple thing? I had no choice but to reluctantly sit in the corner. I looked up and looked around. There were several men present. Several of them were hugging their girlfriends, but I was sitting alone on the cold bench. Am I really that unpopular? I touched the ring on my hand. I looked again at the empty seat next to Christopher, but he never looked at me. He just stared at the door, as if he was waiting for someone. Suddenly, the door opened. Sophia walked in wearing a red dress and holding a birthday cake in her hand. "Chris, happy birthday." Everyone shouted happily. It was a complete contrast to the cold atmosphere when I first came in. The person they were waiting for was probably Sophia, not me. Christopher stood up, walked up to Sophia, took the birthday cake, and led her to a seat, speaking in an intimate tone. "Sophia, you're so sweet. Tonight, your brother will keep you company." Sophia smiled shyly. She gently stroked the man's thigh with her hand and whispered, "Brother, you're so naughty." Someone even specifically turned off the lights, leaving a small space for the two of them. As soon as the lights went out, the gloom in my heart immediately revealed itself. It turned out that the strength Christopher was talking about was exactly like this. I suddenly felt very ridiculous. Years of affection turned out to be inferior to the passion of a few months' acquaintance. He also said, "Emily, you need to learn from her. She has that kind of charm." Oops, so flamboyant. I really can't do it. I'm not in the mood to stay any longer. I stood up and walked out. The others were taken aback by my actions, but they soon recovered. They reminded Christopher, "Chris, your sister-in-law is still here." Christopher frowned and subconsciously said, "It's fine if she's here. It's just right for her to see how Sophia takes care of a man." Sophia snuggled in Christopher's arms. Christopher took a deep breath, smelled the fragrance on her neck, and said with satisfaction, "I like this kind of charm." I smiled, looking at their intimate appearance, but there was a trace of sadness in my eyes. This is the man I have loved for so long, but now he looks like this. I'm so disappointed. I walked around them and planned to leave, but Sophia suddenly held me back. She said softly, "Sister-in-law, don't take it too seriously. You can't learn about sex," she said while handing me a book. I opened it. The title was Self-Cultivation for Young Wives. She continued, "Last time I heard Chris say that your posture is stiff. It's extremely boring. I'm going to help you." She finished. She patted my shoulder, as if to comfort me. A mocking smile played on her lips. I looked down at the book. My face suddenly turned red. It seemed that what happened between Christopher and me had become the laughing stock of everyone's casual conversations. I saw fake smiling faces. How could Christopher embarrass me like this? And he let Sophia do this to me. This is really too much. I sneered inwardly. 6 years of relationship have been wasted. I feel like I'm worthless. I threw the book at Sophia. "You can keep it for yourself. You said you were the best, didn't you?" Christopher lost face this time. I walked straight out the door. There was an uproar in the private room. Someone sneered. They said loudly, "You really think you're something, don't you? Looks like Chris will have to show you who's boss." Christopher heard this and immediately glared at him. His face turned ugly. He said, "You're not good at it, and you won't let people speak. Be quiet," he yelled. Everyone immediately shut up. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. When I walked out of the hotel, it was already 2 o'clock and there were almost no people on the street. I walked alone on the road. The cold wind whistled. It brought back memories of the past. I remembered the scene when Christopher confessed to me. He said he had never met an innocent girl like me. He thought I was cute, and he was willing to spend his whole life protecting me. At the time, I thought he was just saying that. I never imagined that after I rejected him, he would silently stand by my side every day, without disturbing me, but caring about everything about me. Until one day, I was walking home when a group of thugs blocked the alley. They started to attack me, and they wanted to bully me. At that moment when I was most afraid, Christopher appeared. He fought with the thugs. Someone called the police. The thugs were finally arrested. I looked at Christopher, covered in blood. I cried and asked him why he was so stupid. He replied, "I promised to protect you forever. I'm an orphan. I've never had parents. I never thought that someone would do anything to protect me. He gave me hope and a warm home. Now, that promise is in the past. Time and again, he has allowed outsiders to hurt him." I looked down at the plain ring on my hand. Christopher had bought it for me after his family cut off his financial support because they opposed our marriage. He had saved up money from his part-time job, but all these years his family has never accepted me. I smiled bitterly. What love? What vows? They are all empty words. My eyes blurred with tears. I took off the ring. I threw it in the trash. "Christopher, our love is over. I want to go, leave, never see anyone again." Early the next morning, I get up and start packing. Christopher comes home after playing all night. His neck is covered in hickeys. As soon as he enters the room, he notices that the house has been turned upside down. He freezes. He immediately grabs my hand and asks, "Why is all my stuff gone? Not a single thing is left. Where are you going?" Without looking up, and continued quietly packing my things. He kicked my suitcase open with force and said angrily, "I just asked Sophia to teach you some techniques in intimacy. Do you really have to overreact like this?" I didn't say anything and ignored him, but then he picked me up directly and walked towards the bed. "It seems you really want me to do this." He completely ignored my feelings and continued. I struggled hard and shouted, "Put me down, I won't let you." "I won't." He put me on the bed, hugged me tightly. He said, "I know you're angry, but ever since your miscarriage, you've been like a block of wood during intimacy. Sophia and I were just acting to provoke you, I promise. I'm telling the truth." Christopher looked at me earnestly. "I really want to have another child with you." I touched my belly, their first child, because she accidentally lost it. She didn't pay attention, and Christopher had intense intimacy. As a result, an accidental abortion occurred. Since then, she has become afraid, and Christopher's married life has never been harmonious. I turned my head and said in a gentle tone, "I'm just going on a business trip and packing my luggage. The luggage has already been packed. Just think of it as a trip." Christopher's expression eased, and he still held me tightly. "Then come back early. I'll be waiting for you at home." I nodded. Without saying anything else, I quietly leaned into his arms. Maybe I could try to trust him again. The two of them snuggled for a while. Christopher couldn't help but notice my empty fingers. His expression immediately became tense. He hurriedly asked, "Where's your ring? Why is it gone? Why didn't you bring it?" He kept on asking. I didn't know what to say for a moment. "I got my clothes dirty yesterday. I took it to the cleaners," I casually mentioned. Christopher laughed, relaxed, and said, "Since it's dirty, don't want it. It's not expensive anyway. I'll buy you a new one tomorrow." I sighed, thinking, can't just give it up so easily. That was the ring he bought me after working hard and saving money. After getting up and packing, I was going to go to the bathroom to wash my hands. Suddenly, I received a text message on my phone. I clicked to open it. It turned out to be intimate photos of Sophia and Christopher. There were also ultrasound photos of the baby. This was what he meant by fooling around. He still wanted to have a child with me. The ultrasound photo made my heart tighten. I remembered the child I had lost. When I exited and re-entered, the photo had disappeared. Only an apologetic message from Sophia remained. "Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. Chris said the person he loved was me. He said you're not young anymore. He thinks you're not interesting enough. He also said he likes my lively personality. I told him not to do that. He shouldn't do anything to hurt you. But he wouldn't listen. I have a child now. I don't know what to do. Can you help us? Sophia kept provoking, one after the other, outside the door. Christopher knocked and said, Emily, something came up at work. I have to go out for a while. I'll take you shopping for a ring tomorrow. Just wait for me. I didn't say anything. My heart felt sick. It was a waste that this man didn't become an actor. I was full of hatred. How could he treat me like this? Treating me like a fool, playing me for a fool. I stayed in my room for a long time. I was very depressed. In the evening, Christopher suddenly had a brainwave. He insisted on dragging me to a company launch. After so many years of marriage, this was the first time he had publicly announced my identity in public. Unexpectedly, Sophia rushed in. She accidentally bumped into a wealthy businessman with a big belly. The businessman grabbed Sophia and asked, What's wrong with you? You didn't even apologize after bumping into someone. I have to pay compensation. Then, the man looked at her with an evil intent and sized her up. The businessman held Sophia's hand tightly and refused to let go. She cast a helpless look at Christopher. Her eyes were full of grievances, but she couldn't say a word. Christopher frowned. Pulling Sophia behind him, he spoke coldly. My wife doesn't know what she's doing. Mr. Johnson, don't take it personally. Oh, this young lady is your wife. Then who is this? The rich businessman turned to look at me. With a curious expression, he asked, What do you think? Christopher gave a meaningful smile. There was an instant silence. The guests exchanged glances. Their eyes were full of expectation. They began to murmur. I never thought that the ordinary-looking one was the third party. The one dressed up to the nines was the wife. You really can't judge a book by its cover. No wonder his wife stormed in so angrily. The rich businessman slowly walked over. He took my hand and said, Chris is really something. He has achieved so much at such a young age. Why don't you let her keep me company for a night? As a way of making up for my mistake, I looked at him nervously. My eyes were full of pleading. Christopher paused for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. He smiled and said, You're right. She's just a woman, as long as Mr. Johnson is happy. Christopher's words made my face turn pale instantly. I looked at him in disbelief. He actually planned to treat me like an object and give me to the rich businessman. My heart sank to the bottom of the abyss. I couldn't help but say, I'm your wife. You want to protect her, so you want me to go with someone else. His eyes hardened. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, Don't worry. The rich businessman won't find you attractive. I smiled bitterly. I thought to myself that I had always kept to myself, but I never expected to be betrayed by my longtime partner. Now, she wants to protect the third party, so she wants me to go with the rich businessman. In the end, she even said coldly, The rich businessman doesn't even look at me. Christopher pushed me next to the rich businessman, but he left the press conference with Sophia. The rich businessman handed me his jacket and said to me, Since ancient times, too deep a relationship will only leave regrets. It's always easiest to wake up from a beautiful dream. The rich businessman's words completely broke down the defenses in my heart. Yes, although I was carrying my luggage and saying I was leaving, I never actually left. Isn't it because I still have feelings for Christopher? I chose to believe in him again and again. But what was the result? The rich businessman finally sent me home. I looked at him in confusion. He smiled and said, I just can't stand the way he treats women. But you met me. You're lucky. It's hard to say for someone else. After saying that, the rich businessman drove away, leaving me alone in the same place. My heart was pounding. After I got home, I decided to end things with Christopher. I threw away all the things he had given me. I took them out one by one and put them on the bed. Among them was a schoolgirl JK uniform. That was his gift for our first wedding anniversary. A Lolita-style suspender dress was a gift for our second wedding anniversary. A red suspender nightdress was a gift for our third wedding anniversary. I now understand. He liked the simple way I was, but it was just a passing fancy. What he really loves are always those outgoing and open women. He even wanted to change me, no matter how much he said. Or did, in the end. What he meant was, I don't love you anymore. I was so stupid to believe his words. At this time, the phone screen lit up. It was a message from Christopher. Emily, I'm sorry. I dare not take the risk with Sophia, so I chose you. But don't worry. I've arranged for a bodyguard to be with you. He won't hurt you. Wait for me. I'll buy you a new ring. I'm sorry for today. She couldn't hold back any longer. The emotions that had built up for so long came flooding out. He covered his face with his hands. Tears streamed down his fingers. His shoulders shook uncontrollably. It was as if he was crying out all his sorrow. Don't let her take risks. But I'm allowed to. Why did you do this to me? What did I do wrong? You don't love me? Why did you have to hurt me? I went crazy. I doused the entire house in gasoline. Then I found a lighter. I set fire to the house filled with our memories. I watched the flames burn. I muttered like a possessed person. Burn it all. Burn me to ashes too. After sending Christopher my last message, I walked alone into the fire. Christopher, we will never have any contact in this life. The next second, my phone suddenly started vibrating uncontrollably. Christopher and Sophia were still in bed together when they received my text message. We used to rarely argue. Usually he was the one getting angry, and I would try to please him. Christopher never used harsh words, not to mention breaking up. Although he was surprised, but felt that there was a bodyguard there. There shouldn't be any major problems. I have always been easily appeased. In the past, he casually said a few kind words, or gave a gift, and the matter was over. When he realized that he couldn't get through to me, he realized that this situation was different from the past. He suddenly felt a little uneasy. He quickly pushed Sophia away, put on his clothes, and ran out. Before leaving, the woman took his hand and touched her leg and wanted him to stay with her. She said, "Chris, it's so late. I'm so lonely. Can't you stay with me a little longer?" Christopher used to be very susceptible to her charms. Whenever she acted cute, he would definitely stay with her for the night. But today, for some reason, he had no patience for Sophia. Even her deliberately cute act annoyed him. He said directly, "Stop it. I still have things to do. I'm leaving." The man said. Without looking back, he walked quickly home. Sophia stared at his back. The expression on her face instantly changed from gentle and sweet to extremely fierce. She lowered her head, as if she was thinking about something. Christopher hurried home in his car. When he arrived downstairs, he discovered that there was a fire raging in his home. Fire engines drove into the complex, one after the other. He suddenly felt dizzy. He had no idea what to do. He fumbled to turn on his phone to call me, but his fingers were shaking so badly he couldn't even press the number for my name. Just then, a call came in unexpectedly. Christopher was startled. He quickly picked up the phone. "Chris, something's happened. There's been an explosion at your house. Your sister-in-law has killed herself in the house." Suddenly, time seemed to stop. He froze in place. Cries for help came from afar. He whispered, "What?" Suddenly, he remembered what happened before they met. He recalled proposing to her and promising to protect her for the rest of her life, to give her a warm home, and to keep her safe from harm. However, a moment ago, he had handed her over to the rich businessman and let everyone there think that I was his mistress, that I could be treated however he liked. But that was not the case. He had clearly arranged for bodyguards to protect me, and I was so ordinary and uninteresting. Why would the rich businessman be interested in me? He just wanted to get rid of me. That's impossible. Absolutely impossible. Christopher lost control. He tried to rush into the burning house. The firefighters on the scene stopped him. They wouldn't let him in. The rich businessman who had heard the news also rushed back to check on the situation. As soon as Christopher saw him, without saying a word, he rushed up and punched the rich businessman. Then, he grabbed the rich businessman by the collar. He asked sternly, "What have you done to her? She even tried to commit suicide. I'll tell you what, if anything happens to my wife, I won't let you off the hook." The staff quickly stepped forward, calming Christopher, who was losing control. The rich businessman wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, looking at the angry Christopher. He suddenly laughed. He said, "What are you pretending to be affectionate for? Didn't you send her to my bed? You said at the press conference that she was your plaything, your mistress. Now she's your wife. Who are you to accuse me?" Christopher was overcome with remorse and anger. He kept arguing. "I didn't neglect her. I had arranged for bodyguards to protect her. How could you have succeeded, since you had already arranged for someone to protect her? When I asked you for Sophia in the first place, why didn't you hand her over to me? Since you no longer cared about her, why pretend to care? It doesn't matter who you choose." Christopher was at a loss for words. He couldn't refute it. He couldn't even find the right words to explain. He finally realized he had indeed done something wrong. The rich businessman looked at him contemptuously. He sighed. In a low voice, he said, "I didn't do anything to her. I just safely returned her home. For someone like you who doesn't cherish other people's sincerity, where can you find sincerity?" The rich businessman seemed to deliberately want to expose the last bit of his dignity. He continued, "I just feel sorry for this young lady. She chose to end her life at such a young age because of people like you when you were with your lover. Did you ever consider her situation? If I really wanted to make things difficult for you, I'm afraid you wouldn't even receive news of her. not to mention that she would choose to commit suicide by arson. Christopher's reason gradually returned. His heart was filled with shame. He was completely exposed. He fell to his knees in remorse. He regretted everything he had done to me. He was just bored with me. He was tired of me. Isn't that what men do? They get bored with the novelty. They go back to their families. He knew Sophia had done it on purpose, but he still chose to cooperate with her. But he didn't expect me to take such extreme measures, to leave him by committing suicide by arson. If he had known I would leave like this, he would never have done those things. The rich businessman looked at Christopher's back as he knelt on the ground. He remembered his beloved who had passed away, the person he had loved deeply, because her husband had an affair. She was arranged by her husband to accompany someone else. In the end, she couldn't bear it. She chose to jump off a building to end her life. Every time he thought about it, he felt very sad. So at the banquet, when he saw my appearance, it was as if he saw his beloved who had passed away. He wanted to go up and help, but in the end, he was unable to save my life. Christopher was so overcome with emotion that he fainted. When he came to, he was already in the hospital. The moment his eyes opened, he was still calling my name. Christopher's brother Ryan saw that he had woken up and quickly called the doctor over. "Chris, that's great, you've finally woken up. You've been asleep for 3 days and nights, 3 days and nights." He hadn't drunk anything for a long time. His throat was so dry that he could hardly speak. "Yes, Chris, we were all so worried. And Emily, where is Emily?" Ryan lowered his head. He whispered, "Chris, please accept our condolences. Your sister-in-law is gone." When the firefighters found her, her body was so badly burned that it was unrecognizable. Later, her friends came and cremated her body and took her back for burial. Christopher spat out a mouthful of blood in anger and shouted she was my wife. She was mine. Why should someone else take her away? Ryan said nonchalantly. Before my sister-in-law committed suicide, she had already signed the divorce agreement. Now that she is gone, you can also be with Sophia openly. Isn't that great? Christopher sat up abruptly. He slapped Ryan hard in the face. Then he quickly unplugged the needle and rushed out the door. He ran down the street, but he was completely lost. He had no idea where my friends were. He didn't even know anything about me. He returned to our burnt-down house in despair. He saw the charred remains of the house. Everything that held our memories had been burned. There was only a corner of a burnt photo left. Sweet photos of them together. Photos of them doing crafts together. Photos of them traveling together. And the ultrasound photo of their lost child. The man stared at these photos. Suddenly, he realized what he had done to me. I wasn't completely unaware of these things. I just didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. That the harassment by those thugs at the beginning was actually a scene planned by him himself. He confessed to me, in fact. It was because he had a bet with his friends. They bet on how long it would take him to get me. I have known Christopher for a long time. He was very famous at school. At first, I thought his little tricks were really boring. But then, he touched me again and again. I thought, even if the relationship came to an end, the worst that could happen would be a breakup. But I never imagined that once someone stopped loving you, they could actually push you into the abyss themselves and cause you such great harm. At that press conference, in order to protect Sophia, he even sent me to the bed of an older man and let everyone slander me, calling me a third party. He completely crushed the last bit of hope I had. Christopher rummaged through the house, searching every corner, trying to see if there were any remaining photos. But the reality was harsh. Everything had been burned to the ground. Not even a trace remained. He finally understood that I was truly gone, powerlessly. He sat on the floor. "Emily, you're so ruthless. You left me with nothing. You burned our relationship to the ground. It's as if it never existed." Suddenly, the screen of his phone lights up. Ryan has sent him the address of my friend Lily. Christopher sits up quickly. He opens the message. His eyes light up. He immediately rushes out of the house. In the housing estate, Christopher ignores the strange looks of the other residents. He desperately knocks on Lily's door. "Please, tell me, where are her ashes buried? I want to go see her. This is the only thing she left me in this world." Christopher kept shouting, "Please, please." In a moment, a lot of people gathered in the community to watch the show. He still knocked hard on Lily's door. Finally, the door opened. But what greeted him was a basin of cold water. Christopher was drenched in cold water. Lily came out with a wash basin. "What are you pretending to be affectionate for? Emily never wants to see you again. I beg you, give me back Emily's ashes. I am her husband. I have the right to have them back," Lily said coldly. "The person is gone. You just remembered that you are her husband when you were with that woman. Why didn't you think that you still have a wife?" Christopher was speechless. Lily has been angry with Christopher because of my death. Seeing Christopher speechless, she let out all her pent-up anger. "I warned Emily a long time ago that you were unreliable. I told her you were only after her for the bet, but she wouldn't listen. She thought you were sincere. She was impressed by your actions. Whether it was real or not, she was willing to give it a try. But in the end, you hurt her so deeply that she chose to end her life. There's no point in talking about this now. The person is gone. There's no way to bring her back. While she was alive, you didn't let her live a good life. Now that she's gone, I ask you to leave her alone." Christopher shook his head. His face was full of tears. He muttered, "No, no." At this moment, he finally understood. It turned out that he had been deceiving himself. I knew his bet a long time ago, but I chose to sink. I tolerated all the harm he caused to himself. I gave him all the love I had, but he didn't care. He hurt me again and again, until I couldn't take it anymore. I finally left him. He kept thinking back to the little things we had done together. His heart was filled with remorse. However, it was too late to regret. Everything between us was already in the past. On the way home, Christopher sent me a lot of messages on the account that had been deleted. Most of them were his humble pleas and expressions of remorse. Since the fire, I pretended to be dead, changed my identity, moved to another city. Now, I'm doing the work I love, living a simple life every day. Basically, it's just work and home. Thanks to Lily's help, we managed to put on a good show. I let go of the past, regained myself, no longer tied down by emotions. Christopher, on the other hand, became lost. His attitude towards Sophia gradually grew cold. No matter how hard Sophia tried to get close to him, he was unmoved. She didn't expect my death to affect Christopher so deeply. Sophia was afraid that he would leave her. She touched her stomach. She thought quietly for a while. The next evening, Christopher came home after drinking. He received a call from Sophia. There was the sound of a woman sobbing on the phone. He immediately became nervous. "Chris, I have something important to tell you. I really don't know what to do now." Christopher picked up the phone. His hands were slightly shaking. "Is something wrong?" Sophia paused. Her voice was full of fear. "I'm pregnant, but my stomach has been bleeding. I'm so scared." Christopher grabbed his jacket and ran out. He rushed through the red lights to her apartment complex. Sophia was sitting lazily on the sofa. She was dressed attractively. Her makeup was exquisite, like a fairy's. She was holding a photo in her hand. "Sophia, are you okay? Your stomach." Sophia didn't wait for him to speak. She threw herself into his arms in distress. Her fingers touched his Adam's apple from time to time. She said, "Chris, you're so bad. If I hadn't said I was pregnant, you wouldn't have come looking for me." Christopher coldly took her fingers away and asked, "What's going on?" He looked at Sophia. A wave of disgust washed over him. She was always trying to get his attention in every way she could. It was really unbearable. At that moment, Sophia took out an ultrasound photo. In a soft voice, she said, "I'm pregnant, Chris. You're going to be a father." When the man heard the news, he wasn't happy. Instead, he sneered and said, "My child? Only Emily is worthy of giving birth to my child. You were so casual about it. Who knows if the baby is even mine?" Sophia stared at the man in disbelief. She never thought he would be so ruthless. She shouted out of control, "How dare you doubt me? I've only been with you. Why is Emily okay? It was me who was always by your side. She's my wife. How is she not okay?" Christopher stared at her angrily. He questioned, "Now you know it's your wife. Who was in my bed in the first place?" She said she was a boring old woman. "She only likes guys like me. You didn't know, did you?" When I sent her the ultrasound photo, the look on her face, it was so funny. Christopher looked at the almost crazy woman in front of him. Finally, he understood what she had done. It turned out that what crushed me wasn't just what happened on the day of the press conference. It was also Sophia and those photos of him. He had just made a mistake that many men would make. If Sophia hadn't interfered, I would not have chosen to commit suicide, and he would not have lost me. Christopher blamed Sophia for all the pain he felt from losing me. He shouted angrily, "It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I would not have lost Emily." After saying that, he grabbed the vase next to him and smashed it into Sophia's face, causing her to suffer serious facial injuries. "See how long you can be happy. What you did to Emily, I will repay you double," he said, and stormed away in a rage. Sophia tried to raise her head to argue, but the pain from her injuries made her unable to speak. She angrily watched the man leave, grinding her teeth. "Christopher, you've really done this to me. You'll definitely regret it when I found out about all this. It was a long time ago. I thought I would never have any contact with Christopher again in this life, but I never expected to run into him when I went to the hospital. They looked at each other. Both of them looked surprised. Christopher didn't expect to see me here. After all, he thought I was dead, and I couldn't believe my eyes. He was skinny. His face was pale. He looked like he was very ill. But what did that have to do with me? I pretended I didn't know him. I turned around and walked away. I didn't want to have anything to do with him. Emily. Christopher suddenly became emotional, shouting my name. He came over and hugged me tightly. I tried hard to break free. He said, "Emily, I'm sorry, forgive me. What happened in the past was my fault. Let's start again, okay?" Hearing him say that made my stomach feel sick. "You've got the wrong person. I'm not Emily. No, I definitely didn't make a mistake. The mole on your ear. I'll never forget it." I could see the crowd growing around us. I had no choice. I sighed. I let him let go of my hand. Christopher finally let go of me. We walked into the cafe. After we sat down, he kept staring at me. It was as if I would disappear from his sight at any moment. He started to talk nonstop about how much he had missed me. "Emily, it was my fault. You would rather pretend to be dead, give up everything, than see me. But I really realized that I was wrong. I had an affair with Sophia on impulse, but I have now broken off contact with her, and she has lost her child. In fact, you are the only one I have ever loved. You have always been the one. Can we go over the words I have longed to hear?" I finally hear them, but now I don't care anymore. No, without waiting for him to finish, I interrupt him immediately. "We can never be together again. It's like a broken bottle. Even if you glue it back together, it will never be the same. Let bygones be bygones. My love for you is a thing of the past. I really don't love you anymore. I'm sorry." Christopher looked pained. He wanted to keep me, but the words stuck in his throat. I walked away without looking back. No matter how hard it was for him at the moment, there was no chance for us anymore. My life returned to a state of calm. At a work conference, I met the wealthy businessman who had helped me out before. He looked at me with surprise, but soon calmed down. He was very happy to see that I had let go of the past, no longer in trouble because of men, regained myself. He also told me about Christopher's recent situation and asked me, "You still remember when he abandoned you in order to protect that mistress?" I smiled slightly and lowered my head and said, "I still remember. It's been so long. Let's not talk about it." The rich businessman suddenly sneered. "That woman had a bad lifestyle. When she was with Christopher, she already had AIDS. Now Christopher has the disease too. He doesn't have long to live. Even his company has gone bankrupt. I think he brought this on himself. The heavens have finally opened." I remembered when Christopher wanted to get back together. I felt a chill in my heart. He actually wanted to get me into trouble again, just as I thought. People like Christopher say one thing but mean another. He never feels like he's in the wrong. I've had a hard life. Don't expect to have an easy one. Luckily, I woke up in time. I got out. I was lucky. I looked out at the bright sunshine. My mood lightened. I murmured to myself, "Good deeds bring good rewards. Evil deeds bring evil rewards. When the time is right, the natural order of things will take its course."